the 2nd, 2023. Where are you? I'm Dana Durnford. Late sentence. My apologies. That's the way it goes sometimes, right? We'll get there. Got no idea what's going on now. Where the hell is Dana? He's over there somewhere. Oh, we'll get there hopefully at some point. The other screen went blankety blank on me, so that's kind of weird. Who knows what I got done? Well, we can still get on with the show anyway, hopefully. If that's even possible, bear with me. Yipper. We'll get there at some point. That kind of started out a little bit rough on me. I was worried about the nuclear industry. A lot of the headlines we're seeing, they're shipping food. They're shipping food. Is the nuclear industry evil for growing food in Fukushima nuclear radioactive wasteland's no-go zone? And so in case you're not familiar with that, they're growing food in the actual nuclear wasteland itself, which, you know, of course, that doesn't sound possible, right? No, I can't be doing something like that. Dana, my goodness. And we cover it all the time, unfortunately. And they're growing food, and they're growing food in the no-go zone alongside of 1-ton bags of radiation, and 14 prefectures. The food was banned by 55 countries from all those prefectures, and Fukushima is just one of all those markers you see there. So it's quite astounding that they're growing food right alongside the 1-ton bags. This is the very last spot, and you can see he's not wearing any protection. And this is meant to ship it worldwide. And so I got 25 of these types of headlines put together for you to kind of get you in the right mode, if there's such a thing, when it comes to nuclear. I'm having a problem with my armrest tonight. Don't worry, we'll get through it one way or another. And maybe another. And so the question is, who's the authority, first off? And so a lot of people seem to think the International Atomic Energy Agency is the actual authority, but they're actually not an authority. They're just, how do you put that, really? Because it kind of defies any kind of rationale when you're thinking about this conversation, that the IAEA is supposed to be the premier organization, right? Now, they say that their standards are based on benefit, which means it's natural stuff. That means it's natural stuff. The standards were merely international consensus, as studies have not found a safe level of radiation. They have not found a safe level. So no matter how small it was, there was no such thing. And then other studies were showing us that a single atom, And we might describe it as a Becquerel maybe sometimes, where it decays every second. But it might do that for millions of years. And because it's man-made, it retains its energy, whereas natural stuff doesn't have much energy for long life. And so they conflated those to confuse you on purpose. Japan's radioactive children will be fine. It says New Scientist, and we got entire folders on New Scientist propaganda, and they're supposed to be a major trustworthy publication, right? So it's very disappointing when you find them wanting so much. Claiming that radioactive children will be fine. Think about that statement. Oh, no, the radioactive children will be fine. The thyroid gland's only emitting 35 millisieverts, which is, I'm laughing because it's the gallows laugh. It's 35,000 microsieverts. And think of a microsiever, in order for something to actually emit that kind of energy, the physical atoms that it takes, because they had to ingest and aggregate physical atoms to the thyroid, means the thyroid is saturated. So think of a 35,000 microsieverts, and think of a microsiever as 150 hardcore atoms that are pulsing energy at the speed of light every second, killing all the cells and DNA and chromosomes around it. And there's 35,000 times 150 pulses a second. Now that's undercutting it. That's lowballing it, right? It's much more higher than that. But for the thyroid gland to actually pulse 35 millisieverts, 1,000 millisieverts is a sievert. These are extraordinary numbers. These are pre-Fukushima. These are inconceivable numbers. It's just simply never heard of. And this is simply not true. This claim is not true, but these are supposed to be some of the best authorities. Thyroid abnormalities in 55% of the Fukushima girls tested age 11 to 15. Females of all species are 4 times more vulnerable in humans than males. And they seem to be, they get a much more diversity of illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries. 45% of the kids in Fukushima survey had thyroid exposure to radiation, up to 50 millisieverts, 50,000 microsieverts per year equivalent for a 1-year-old. These are children, because children are developing. The thyroid is producing a lot of hormones, right? And these are radioactive hormones. And so this can trigger around 1,800 diseases and illnesses. 11 becquerels a kilogram, children start to see heart problems. This was a study from Chernobyl. I screwed that up. Wanted to go there, just bear with me. I'm a little slow in my old age. I'm getting old. Time is caught up. Radiation health specialist, children with over 11 becquerels a kilogram. So 11 becquerels in comparison with 35,000 times 150 becquerels is quite the discrepancy. And you put 200 million of these becquerels, say, for instance, which are atoms pulsing energy from the isotopes, ionized isotopes, every second. So think about what, you can't see that, right? 200 million atoms. And for this purpose, we'll call them becquerels, because a becquerel is something that's pulsing energy. That's the pulse of energy. Each second is the becquerel. The atom has the isotope. The isotope is the anthropogenic man-made species that we're talking about. So irreversible heart damage at 50 becquerels a kilogram. These numbers are so low you can't filter that, and you can't perceive it either. The U.S. government-funded study, West Coast and Hawaii residents are Fukushima downwinders. Well, the whole planet was, right? Now, the effects of the radiation exposure are expected to be beneficial. of course, this is absurdness to even suggest it. There's absolutely no studies to back up that type of assertions. All the studies are the opposite. When you look a little deeper, it's Loveless Respiratory Research Institute at a New Mexico. And Dr. Raymond Gilmedy is one of their lead researchers. He does his experiments, and he's got 95 published studies on beagle dogs and beagle puppies, where they make them inhale the radiation, then they sacrifice them, which is they slaughter them, and then they check for radiation in certain glands. Now, a lot of studies where the animals are allowed to live until they die of the cancer, all the way to the very end, suffered out, and they might use insidious radiation doses to try to reverse some of the tumors, which is madness. You use radiation to create them and then expect to get rid of them, where you create more tumors, where metastasize quickly now throughout the whole body. So Loveless Respiratory Research Institute is a military operation. News media misinformation related to the emergency trigger enormous social fears worldwide of radioactivity for downwind populations, which is the entire planet. Hermetic effects activated natural protective processes are much more likely than the lecturous effects, harmful effects. So claiming that being in a radioactive plume is now healthy. So if a terrorist sets off a nuclear bomb, they done you a favor, is what they're saying, right? If a nuclear plant melts down, they done you a favor. This is ludicrous to even suggest something like that. And all the academics who participated in it should lose their degrees, at least. For downwind population, hermetic effects, activating natural, but see, man-made radiation, it doesn't activate natural. A single atom gets in your body. It pulses energy almost at the speed of light every second. It destroys all the cells and DNA and chromosomes and every organs and everything around it, fractions of it, at the speed of light. Now, it's going to pulse again in a second at the speed of light again. And this is in every direction. This is symmetrically in every direction. And so your body has to repair every cell, every DNA, every chromosome that got damaged or harmed or killed, right? Has to do it right away. But if you're pulsing energy every second for the rest of your life in your body, then you can't heal it. So your body continues constantly to make white blood cells to attack and also to repair. It does both of them. So it's attacking it to try to build a tumor around it over 20, 30, 40 years. But at the same time, it's producing another bunch of white blood cells that are trying to repair the damaged cells, the chromosomes, the DNA. I just happened to notice comment section. Colette thought the counter, the timer was crazy tonight. When I had 40 minutes left natural time, it said 70 minutes. And I had screwed up the time on my end and put in 9:30, even though I don't know how that's possible, but that's apparently what I've done. And so when I noticed that, I changed it back to 10 p.m., which is my time when I start. And then, which was 40 minutes left, and it said I had 70 minutes left, and I was like, it must be a glitch on my end, but it turns out it's not. Yeah, turn the audio up. My apologies, I've been struggling with the audio for so many years. So that should be a lot better. My apologies. And Albert, quite a few people I'm sure would have asked me. Well, that's the first time I looked at the comments. I've been struggling with the audio, as everybody knows, for over a decade. And we even bought isolators for all the plugs, so they're protected from the circuit of the building, right? And these are big devices. They look like, like a CD player, and you plug your equipment into the back of it, and it isolates it from feeding back into your circuit loop. We got real microphones, real cables. I've done so much to try to resolve it. And I kind of gave up on it, and it's okay. Let's keep rolling because we're far to go. Disinformation by nuclear proponents try to confuse the public, and that's what I showed you that time. In fact, there was 865,000 extra cancers by 2012. Not everybody got health care. And so, is the nuclear industry evil for growing food in the Fukushima nuclear radioactive wastelands? And they're doing it in the no-go zone, in the actual no-go zone. Officials had raised the radiation levels for residents to get a little tiny bit of protection by 75 times higher. And there's no way you can justify, the only way you can justify it is if you were trying to cover it up. But then the effects upon the population are going to be brutal. So they stop people from being able to protect themselves by flicking their fingers, because they make the rules, and which means they're out of control, right? They're completely out of control. Child's risk of cancer, by the way, is up to 100 times higher than an adult who has the same exposure, and that we've seen studies showing instead of 1 in a million children with thyroid tumors, and the tumors they're talking about are 2 centimeters. Your thyroid gland is 3 by 5 centimeters. So these are huge tumors when you consider where they're 2, right? And this was 13,646 out of 38,000. This is 358,000 out of a million when you scale it up. These are unheard of numbers anywhere on the planet. And they decided to pretend that it doesn't matter. 6 in 10 Fukushima children tested have diabetes, and that they're expecting diabetes. So eating food from that kind of nuclear wasteland is a terrible, terrible, terrible thing to do, right? Is the nuclear industry evil from growing food in the Fukushima nuclear radioactive wastelands no-go zone on top of everything else? DDR, sir, DDR. The very lowest levels of radiation are harmful to life, and we have to rethink exposure levels from nuclear plants. And we know from the anti-neutrino experiments a few weeks ago here in Canada, where they were able to detect the neutrinos 150 miles away and 1.5 miles in deep underground amongst the rocks. Didn't shield the new anti-neutrinos coming out of the reactors. And these are faster than light, speed of light. So imagine living 15, 20, 30, 40, 100 miles away on the surface, right? Because you can't be... the fact that they were able to detect the nuclear plant itself, because this is not coming from a gas plant or an oil plant or a coal plant, this is coming out of the nuclear power plants. It's extraordinary. It's absurd. So what else is coming out of these plants? Right? Because a lot of them will say, well, I even heard some of the crazies talk about how Japan was on the other side of the planet, so the neutrons couldn't make it around the planet and get at you because they pulse in a straight line. And it's like, what are you talking about, right? The radioactive fallout is the issue. But they were trying to, disorient those who didn't know any better. And I'm sure it's very effective. A nuclear report warns of an apocalyptic scenario to Fukushima in weeks ahead, and this could one day be considered the start of the ultimate catastrophe of the world and the planet. The world and the planet. The entire world and the planet. I didn't get any feedback on raising the volume, so it must be okay, I'm assuming. As the public, possibly worldwide, sickens over time, as the public. So the time about the human population worldwide, which have a lot more defenses than insects and birds, by the way. And so you can't contaminate the entire population worldwide and make them sick without affecting all the species too. A Nobel Prize winner in NHK, which is major media in Japan. Audio is better? Thank you, James. Awesome. The only way to preserve, if there's such thing as better, I know how bad my audio actually is compared to a lot of people on the internet. There's nothing I can do about it. I've tried everything for years. The only way to preserve human life is to completely turn away from nuclear power. Completely turn away from nuclear power. Very high concentrations of hot particles in the Pacific Northwest include plutonium and americium. 1,500 atoms of sulfur peroxide, hydrogen, buckyballs. The releases in Washington were so great, they're at 100,000 times normal. Another study showed the xenon at 450,000 times above detection levels persisted. That the site itself disappears, and this is 80 times normal speed or something, where the entire site has disappeared from steam coming out of the ground, and with stationary Geiger counters in 6 places, it was lethal doses at 10 sieverts per hour. Dose. Well, you don't need to be there for an hour to die. You'll die right away that second that you're exposed to it. Right away. And so these are catastrophic numbers. That's going to radiate all the pipes, the cement, the steel, and everything else, which has already been irradiated many, many times over. U.S. is receiving a steady flow of radiation, and so this stuff will come to North America and the Northern Hemisphere right away within a few days. These are massive plumes that are, you can't see it, so, but consider it as a major forest fire that affects your community where you get dust on your vehicles every morning. Well, this is so small you can't see it on your cars, but don't think for a second that it's not landing. U.S. is receiving a steady flow of radiation, media paying little attention to the radiation in food, as if the problem only involved Japan. Surges in airborne radioactive releases gone on for years at Fukushima. And the reactors, another statement was the reactors will be releasing radioactive steam for a year or more. When in reality, it'll never stop, most likely, right? And so when you see statements from the Japan Times, as the public possibly worldwide sickens over time, the truth will come out. But you got to think about also how long they've been poisoning you with radiation. Radium spray. This is absurd. Like today, when you think about it, it's hard to comprehend how this could ever happen. But it happened in a big way for many, many years, where they were selling radium spray. So houses that are 100 years old, you got to be careful of buying them because they would have been using this stuff in those homes. Radium spray cleans everything but a guilty conscience. I can imagine why they put that there. A liquid cleaner polisher. My God, man. A dust layer, a disinfectant. Well, they do use radiation inside of very, very expensive lenses, and the pulsing of the energy through the glass, the lenses, these $20,000, $30,000, $100,000 lenses, the radiation is pulsing, only pulses a short distance, but it stops dust from settling on the lens. Think about that statement. Radium spray in a liquid cleaner and polisher, a dust layer, a disinfectant, deodorizer, and a sure death to flies, mosquitoes and roaches and bed bugs and fleas and hog lice. It just doesn't even seem that this could ever have happened. We'll polish and clean furniture, so be careful of buying antiques. Buggies, automobiles, marble, tile, brass, nickel, carpets. My God, boy. Rugs, mattings, parts of machinery, typewriters, cash registers, and other things not mentioned. My goodness. They also made radium lipstick, radium eyeshadow for children, radium suppositories rather. Radium is restoring health to thousands. No medicines or drugs, just a light, small, comfortable, inexpensive radioactive pad worn on the back by day and over the stomach at night. This was genocide on a whole different scale. You can be sure it's helping you before you buy it. Over 150,000 sold at that time. Every one of them would have died from radiation poisoning. Thousands have written us that it healed them of everything. No matter what you have tried or what your troubles may be, use radioactive solar pad. Radioactive solar pad. Man. Scrupulous. Wow. Radium spray. The new combination bug killer, disinfectant, and furniture polish. Guaranteed by grocers. That's reassuring. To kill all insects and vermin. Try it at our expense. And some of the people that own these businesses are probably still alive today. Well, their families, I should say. Making Tokyo area uninhabitable. Potential global catastrophe, Fukushima Unit 2. So Unit 2 was the only building that didn't disintegrate. And that's the one they're claiming they're worried about, right? I'll show you a couple pictures to quantify that. It would be the end of Japan if Unit 2 goes. Here's what Reactor 3, which was a mixed oxide fuel reactor, and Reactor 4. These are just stumps of 190-foot buildings. But if Unit 2 goes, Tokyo will be uninhabitable, and it'll be the end of Japan. Reactor 3 was a MOX fuel facility, infinitely worse than a normal lethal disease factory known as nuclear power plants. Reactor 4, they're completely gone. Okay. Made it this far. So we've done all of that. We've done all of that because of the poll somewhere. Is the nuclear industry evil for growing food in Fukushima nuclear radioactive wasteland's no-go zone? And the no-go zone by rights is 14 prefectures, not just the Fukushima prefecture. So Fukushima should be off limits, obviously, see? And every organism in the Fukushima prefecture, which is 6,000 square mile, I think it is contaminated at around 1.4 million becquerels decay in the worm's excrements 60 miles away. So these are catastrophic numbers we're talking about symmetrically throughout Fukushima prefecture, but remember the food was banned in 14 prefectures by 55 countries. What have I got done? I can adjust that, I think, anyway. I didn't screen capture it right is what happened. It doesn't matter what I've done. Is that what's going on, or is that just me? That's just me. We'll figure it out. I think I might have it. Who knows? What happened was I lost my number one ping that I use all the time. And we'll get there. Yeah, well, can't get there if I can't get there. Hang on a second. Let's see what I got done to myself here. What a day. Did I do that all day? No, I just done that on a couple of stories, I think, accidentally. Let me check another story. Okay. I accidentally cut off the stories. How does Iron Man's arc reactor work? And of course, Iron Man is a huge hit worldwide in theaters and Netflix and major streaming services and illegal ones, I'm sure. It's the key to Iron Man saving Tony Stark's life more than once and running not only his suit but also the tower, the Avengers Tower, whatever that is. It existed well before Iron Man did, was created by his father as a fusion reactor, a microscopic fusion reactor. There used to be a big one, used to run the Empire apparently, right? There was enough energy there to keep his heart running for 50 lifetimes. But there was no reason, I guess, there's no reason to say something like that, only to inject something like that, only to make the nuclear industry's fusion industry, turn it into a fantasy for a vulnerable part of the population. When will the 100 leave Netflix? And this was after a nuclear disaster, nuclear apocalypse devastated Earth. And and because these two guys wrote this paper on nuclear winter, UN picked up on it, right? Like whenever you hear climate change, that's a paper from James Hansen in 1980s, just after Chernobyl, and that set the stage, of course, for the rhetoric you hear constantly, the carbon rhetoric. And you can take NASA for that propaganda. They never had no evidence, and they just turned it into a weapon, same as the net zero was by paper by Miles Allen. That was weaponized by UN. And climate change and carbon footprint was weaponized by BP Oil after one of their oil ships, went up on the shore and contaminated the coastline. They wanted to blame you for wanting the oil, not them for getting it and cheaping out on the ships. The show takes place after nuclear apocalypse devastated Earth and follows the remaining humans living on a space station. And everybody's probably heard of it, I would imagine, or the majority of you. This is meant to perpetuate nuclear industry. Like they originally turned it into, you gotta be scared of nuclear weapons, and then turned it into a nuclear power, which is powering the spaceship, or the ship they were living on, right? Denise Richards was heartbroken after being trolled for her sexualized James Bond role. Well, that's what James Bond series does, is they find attractive girls and use them to get people to watch the show. She received insults from people who would question why she wore shorts if her character was a nuclear standard. Well, I can guarantee it was no men. It was women, right? But it wasn't men. Men weren't complaining because a good-looking young lady was wearing shorts. That's the only reason they want to watch it, most likely. Just last night, that was the first couple of stories that showed up when I was researching nuclear stories for tonight. And I was like, what the hell is going on? We're getting back-to-back stories. Well, the nuclear industry owns Hollywood for the most part, right? If you put nuclear in your movie, the military will give you all the helicopters and weapons and everything else you ever wanted. Access to the aircraft carriers, whatever you like, as long as you promote nuclear. Hinkley Point, and there's many other things that will do the same thing for like wars and stuff like that. I mean, like the Pentagon got 29,000 public relation officers. And so they're in contact with the media all the time. Hinkley C Power Station creates, imagine if I had 29,000 public relation officers helping me. That'd be the end of nuclear. Hinkley C Power Station creates 30,000 training places. 30,000. So they need you to do the dirty work for them, to build these disease factories. And we kind of covered this last night in pictures where when you look at Hinkley Point and you realize that in the material they use for Hinkley Point, you can build enough geothermals plants out of that to power the entire country for hundreds of years, right? And everything is recyclable with geothermal. Nothing is recyclable with nuclear, despite the fact they do recycle some nuclear. But everything on the site is bombarded with neutrons for 50 or 60 years. There's zero possibility to escape it. Courses will be available in demand skills like electrical work, welding, steel work, pipe installations. The centers will become part of Hinkley Point C's legacy. Available from local, national businesses to enroll their own employees, which helps to strengthen the region's industrial capabilities. In other words, when you look at the big pictures of what's going on there, the renewables with storage could have replaced it quite a long time ago, and they scuttled every attempt that there was made. And then the money that got through for renewables, they wasted it or used it. They built a lot of the mills in the communities to drive everybody nuts so they would never ask again, right? You see that worldwide when you do that routine. The best spot to put a windmill would be on a mountain where the wind blows all the time, not on the ocean. Russian troops, and we put it on the ocean, now they're blaming, and windmills been in the ocean a long time, but all of a sudden there's a big build off New Jersey, and the nuclear industry feels threatened, so they're trying to blame all the emaciated whales and the windmills that are being built in the ocean. Well, the whales had to get emaciated 10,000 kilometers away to show up in New Jersey emaciated. Russia had troops get radiation sickness after camping in Chernobyl. They were fishing apparently at the river right there. And they wanted to dredge that river a couple of years ago. But the radiation they would have liberated by dredging it would have been catastrophic. And so that got shot down. They were trying to do it so they can bring people by tour up that river, because that's like hundreds of kilometers long. And you can go all the way to the ocean, which is 600 kilometers away. And the river brings all the radiation there regardless, right? So does the fallout, of course. Russian troops got radiation sickness after camping in Chernobyl, but they don't really give you any examples. And I have no doubt that's what happened, but they don't actually give you any examples. But the fact that, we covered this so much, and the forest they're in has a unique color because of the radiation destroyed the trees, right? We've showed a lot of studies on that. The long and dirty legacy of nuclear power, there's an understatement of a year. Hi, everybody. Yeah, Hinkley's British, that's right. I got no idea. Let's keep her going. In the normal course of events, when you're financing a dodgy venture, it's hard to imagine your money being plowed into an enterprise doomed from the start and being ignorant of the fact. So how many of us knew we were bankrolling an outfit with a boat in the Irish Sea, embarked on a mission guaranteed to be a very bad idea all around? The craft in question operated with a simple instruction to blast off underwater seismic guns to certain detriments of dolphins and porpoises, and they've been doing this for many years, as part of a madcap exercise to find a subterranean cemetery for large amounts of lethal radioactive waste from Columbia's Sellafield nuclear site, which was a reprocessing site surrounded by farms. And we've covered this all ever since they started this narrative over the years, is they want to drill under the ocean and store the nuclear waste under the ocean. It's very Pacific, right? And they know it's going to melt down at some point, and so then the ocean would end up coming down into that cavity, right? That's what they're up to. And that's the problem by putting it on land, is it's going to melt down at some point. It might not be for 1,000 years, it might be 2 years, like WIP, right? It might last for 50 years, who knows? But at some point, it's going to melt down. It doesn't need oxygen. It'll consume all the infrastructure around it. It'll get bigger. It'll consume all the ground above it, and it'll actually detonate, and it'll crack the earth, because you can't put it out and you can't contain it. It becomes very explosive, very volatile, and it'll detonate. The caverns will. That'll crack the earth. And I showed you examples of that earlier, by the way, where the earth was cracked in 6 places and the steam coming out of the ground was 10 sieverts an hour. By the way, all underground nuclear tests were vented into the environment because they all cracked the ground wide open, right? If you go watch the videos, you'll see what I mean. So everything was vented. Because like that, the reason they were doing underground, because they had a moratorium, so this self-imposed moratorium of atmospheric detonations. They're going to keep working on it and use it underground, but that always cracked the ground. So it was the same thing. It's not as bad per se, and obviously, right? But it's not good, because now the rain gets down into the ground and gets to these radioactive caverns created by the nuclear detonation. We know some of them today are still at over 400 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. With radioactive substances, they take literally tens of thousands of years to decay. So you want to dig a hole in the ground, put all the radiation in the hole in the ground, and let's bring up the poll again. Is the nuclear industry evil for growing food in Fukushima nuclear radioactive wastelands no-go zone? Well, yes, it is, Dana, and everybody agreed. Back to Martin Frackler, because we didn't really cover that last night. It was close to the end of the show. I was getting burnt out, and I kind of skipped through it. And when I was looking at it at night before I chucked it into the black hole of the news cycle, I said, wait a second, I better cover that, because it's important. So Martin Frackler, I believe it's Harvard, and we played the clips many times over the years. They used Martin Frackler from the New York Times to explain Fukushima instead of one of the nuclear scientists that they actually had there. Maybe it was Stanford, actually. Wave taller than, or Berkeley, I can't remember. There's so many of them we covered, right? It wasn't Yale, that's for sure. Slammed against hundreds of miles of the northern coastline. So the wave was about 680 kilometers, 400 and plus miles. One wave measured 33 feet high. It actually measured 140 feet high in a couple of places, and was traveling at 500 miles per hour when it struck the coast. That's why it ripped up 2,000 square miles of the coastline. The two natural, and there was multiple tsunami waves, right? Claimed close to 20,000 lives immediately, but long term is going to be a few billion from the radioactive fallout. The crisis didn't end there. The tsunami knocked out power to the Fukushima Daiichi plant. It also went right through the plant, launching a nuclear meltdown. I never heard that phrase before, launching a nuclear meltdown, whose fallout still affects the citizens today and for at least another couple of 100,000 years, if the humanity and the species survive this International relations, internal politics to this day, according to Martin Frackler, a perpetual lawyer for the nuclear industry. He worked for many of the institutes that are the pro-nuclear lobbying groups after Fukushima. He proved his worth, right? That's some nice cushy jobs. And you should know, Frackler, a writer, journalist, and Harvard research fellow, which is absurd, right? The lobbyists have captured your universities a very long time ago. Martin Frackler is a nuclear lobbyist. They used to work at the New York Times. He arrived in Japan one day after the quake, and his team coverage earned him a spot as a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. And he lied and lied and lied, and we've covered it. Last Thursday, he joined Arnold Howitt, a co-director of the program in crisis leadership at the Harvard Kennedy School, to discuss how the nuclear accident, the second worst in history after Chernobyl. Of course, Japan, Chernobyl was a brand new reactor, never had no fuel pools, and was mostly graphite, and so not so much uranium, plutonium. Japan's was 4 reactors with 8 fuel pools, and all of that was lost, and these reactors were about 100 times Chernobyl because they were pure uranium, pure plutonium. And so it's really interesting when you see those connotations everywhere worldwide. No one is willing to have you're not allowed to have a debate about Fukushima or 911 or COVID to discuss how the nuclear accident, the second worst in history, let's rub it in our faces, after Chernobyl, irrevocable altered Japan. The event called Dry Run for War, how Fukushima changed Japan and its place in the world, was hosted by the Radiological Foundation Institute for Asia, the program on the U.S.-Japan relations at the Weatherhead Center for International Radar Affairs, and the Edwin O. Reichower Institute of Japan Studies. The tsunami hit 3 of the plant's 6 reactors, sustained severe core damage and melted down, releasing hydrogen and radioactive material. Well, how convenient just to glaze over it as if it could be summed up in an eighth of a sentence. My goodness. Really, my goodness. Then the leaking hydrogen detonated. The hydrogen wasn't leaking. There was no hydrogen there. You can't leak it. It exists because the zirconium claddings on the fuel rods have melted down, which is around 1,600 degrees. And then the fuel rods, pellets, will catch fire. They'll burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. Leaking. Such a terrible word, right? To this day, a lot of the details of Japan's response remain hidden, thanks to people like Martin Frackler. Plant manager Meiso Yoshida, I really disrespect that person, was the first to risk people's lives, Frackler said, sending in a suicide squad to vent and cool the reactors. So his version is they cooled the reactors, invented it, but they melted down, but they went in and invented. You couldn't go in and invent it. The tsunami took out all the infrastructure, all the telephone poles for 680 kilometers. Right, it flooded the site, which was at sea level, just slightly above sea level. And then when you see the pictures of the tsunami cutting through there, when you see the pictures of the tsunamis cutting through there, so the atoms, all this energy, and this so small you can't perceive it. But when you scale it up to numbers that are imperceivable to the average human, you end up with MC squared, E equals MC squared. This is a catastrophic event. E equals MC squared. Well, it is for YouTube, apparently. YouTube, how are you, Mr. YouTube? How are you over here? Sorry, Google, don't hurt me. Yeah. I always want to have a cigarette after doing that. The only problem is I don't smoke, but we'll get there. Can't force about 69 workers to stay at the plant and pump water onto the reactors. These workers were the inspiration for the movie Fukushima 50. There's been thousands and there's tens of thousands of Fukushima 50s that have went there. Eventually, reluctantly, he did ask the U.S. for help. Others might argue the Americans forced their way in after detecting a radioactive plume 100 miles offshore. The USS Ronald Reagan was only a kilometer off the nuclear plants. All their digital watches stopped working at the same time. The Americans pushed Japan to take heroic measures and risk their lives to get the meltdown under control. You can't get a meltdown under control. But if you go through the history of Martin Frackler and you see how many times he lied to you, it's every time he wrote an article. And every article is full of just absurd lies. And so they were nominated for a Pulitzer Prize. Let's give Ted Bundy a Nobel Prize next, right? So we got a poll. Got a poll. Is the nuclear industry actually evil for growing food in Fukushima's nuclear radioactive wastelands no-go zone? I think that's pretty clear cut. So does everybody else. 98%. Somebody accidentally hit no, but it looks over. But that happens sometimes. So we got to cover this story because that's kind of where we left off last night. Advancing the understanding of spent fuel pools during loss of cooling accidents. So they refused to acknowledge that Fukushima melted down the fuel pools. They refused to acknowledge a single fuel pool. In fact, they claimed they got, maybe I would do it this way. They claimed they got the fuel out of reactor 4. And of course, that's reactor 4 to your right, reactor 3 to your left. The fuel pools were at the top of the buildings. There is no buildings, just these little stumps left from a 19-story building, 190-foot tall building. But we know where the plume went. It's covered the whole planet after 20 days, right? Following the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant accident, the international nuclear community initiated a deep assessment of the safety of the spent fuel pools. And which store spent fuel from reactors that are splitting the atoms. So the fuel pools, the water you're looking at is so clean because you replace it, most of it, 120,000 liters rather, out of each pool each day. It's filtered and special water, borated, treated water, so it helps tame down some of the neutron bombardments that are going on. But each day, it boils off 120,000 liters. Each liter is saturated with isotopes, but you can't see it. But each day, there's a plume like this that's coming out of 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. Following the and they're all surrounded by farms on top of this, except for a small fraction. And they're usually built in cities, right? Following the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant nuclear meltdowns, the international nuclear community initiated a deep assessment. A number of the actions, this was the cover-up in full second gear. A number of actions were launched since the accident in an attempt to mitigate the risk of a potential spent fuel pool accident. You don't have accidents, you have meltdowns. The Nuclear Energy Agency's working groups on the analysis and management of accidents is responsible for activities related to potential accidental situations in nuclear power plants and helping to understand and reduce the risk and hide the consequences and the consequences of the spent fuel pool accident is a focus area for the group. So the Nuclear Energy Agency has never went to Fukushima nuclear meltdowns, by the way. Approximately 30 experts from this group assembled at the French Institute for Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety, the IRSN. So the IRSN, I'll show you their study, actually, of Fukushima radioactive fallout, seeing as they're being quoted. That's only fair, isn't it? This fallout, the accident happened on the 11th, we're at the 20th. The accident happened on the 11th, we're at the 25th, 26th, 27th, 28th, 29th, the 30th. This is 20 days after. That's 20 days after the meltdown. The whole planet is covered in radioactive fallout. And their actual emissions, that's not into the model. The loss of the reactor cores and the fuel pools. And they're denying the fuel pools are missing from those two buildings. The official story is those fuel pools are still there, but they're invisible 100 feet above the carnage you're looking at. That's the official story. So that's why I got a whopping 23 people on my show. Is the nuclear industry evil? I think that's all we really needed for the poll anyway, isn't it? Is the nuclear industry evil? You don't really need anything else. You can just fill in the blank yourself. How sad is that? Let me keep her going here. French Institute for Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety, which is their model. There's many models. They're not. They're internet. There's the Norwegian Institute for Air Research, for instance. There's absurd amount of these models. In fact, France is another one from the France was the cesium-137. The cesium-137 was 1 million to 10 million times. And this was by the same organization, the French Institute for Radiation Protection and Nuclear Safety, the IRSN. And you'll see that in the right-hand corner of that picture you're looking at, IRSN. That's 1 million to 10 million times after Fukushima of cesium-137. That's one of the most important models out there, by the way, is that model of cesium-137. That's such an important, unbelievable important model that we haven't used for a few years, and all of a sudden I came across it and I was like, oh shit, I forgot about it. Because you use a lot of information over these years, right? And I learned that a lot of information was super important, and that you got to basically drill it into people over and over and over and over. So subconsciously, they can recall that. And visually, most of you can visually see. If you say something about a radioactive fallout map to somebody you're talking to, most people that watch these shows regularly can visualize that. It's hard to articulate it. We say, think of it as a snowstorm, but you can't see it. So here's the Charmers who's refused to acknowledge. They refuse to acknowledge that these reactor fuel pools are gone. These people don't. So it's hard to, it's impossible for the industry to have credibility when you refuse to acknowledge what happened. So then you have to be wondering what else is it that they're not talking about or acknowledging. And the only result of that is going to be hideous, right? Several designs of heat removal system nuclear power plants consider large pools with immersed heat exchangers. This is really interesting, heat exchangers. Because they boil off about 120,000 liters a day, and each liter is saturated with anthropogenic man-made isotopes because the fuel rods are splitting the atoms. That's why there's heat. The heat is created by the atoms pulsing energy every second. And so all you can do is vent it. One of the ways you vent it is by boiling off 120,000 liters a day. And so when you hear them talking about after nuclear accidents, you need to boil it off, right, or dump it in the ocean, because they're disconnected from any type of reality. They've been getting away with it without the public under comprehension of it, because most people, when you hear nuclear waste, that's where their brain stops. The problem with nuclear waste is splitting the atoms. And that should terrify the living daylights out of you, because it's been doing it for 80 years. It never goes away, so you're adding each day this incredible massive plume from 1,000 fuel pools worldwide. There's nothing more important. There really isn't. Nothing more important than this subject. It has to be dealt with. We're going to come up with solutions. Can't come up with real solutions. We can come up with solutions if we had a conversation. The industry realizes that if we have a conversation, everybody's pension in the nuclear industry disappears. And their families are going to hate their guts forever. And that will be criminal charges. If it was illegal to poison you, because it's not, if it was illegal to poison you with radiation, nuclear couldn't exist, and no form of it. Because you can't make it without poisoning the entire planet. Recently, these pools have been considered within some passive systems for reactor decay heat removal systems. Well, the heat is created, and what they're actually talking about was having reservoirs, above it that can naturally feed water into the pools, because they're going to boil off water all day long, right, from the splitting of the atoms. They're pretty sneaky. During the meeting at the IRS and the experts exchanged on the status of the spent fuel pool regulations accidents analysts, again, that's their model, looking at around 10 million times weapons fallout, cesium-137 levels. And when you actually look at the other models that they produced at the same time, I'll speed this up for time constraint. This is, say, at 20 days, right there. There's the 31 days in this month. Yeah. So that's 20 days after the tsunami. This is 20 days after Reactor 3 detonated, which was on the 15th, right? The French Institute for No Protection. And, of course, when you consider France, they created civil war in Niger for 60 years to get their cheap uranium, high-grade uranium. They destroyed the French Polynesian, all the fresh water. Every human there was irradiated and suffers from the radiation. They did the same thing to the Sahara Desert, to Algeria. They did 160 plus large nuclear weapons, hydrogen bombs, everything else. They polluted the whole planet, but what they done to the French Polynesians is unconscionable, really. Survey on protective actions for radiological and nuclear emergencies. There's no way to protect you. So you've had a nuclear emergency, this is what it does after 20 days. So how are you going to protect the local community? How are you going to protect the state? How are you going to protect your country when you can't protect, and you got to protect all countries worldwide? The only way to do it is not have it on your planet. I know that sounds crazy, but because what we're talking about now is the Nuclear Energy Agency. In order to better understand existing strategies, arrangements for implementing effective actions in the event of a nuclear radiological emergency, like even the plumes they got are on venting. They're not on the actual meltdowns or the losses of the inventories. La 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 la. Let's keep it rolling. Collect information from member countries be incorporated to a revised version of the Nuclear Energy Agency's countries' protective measure handbooks. How are you supposed to protect people when the plumes cover the entire planet, right? Survey collects information about precautionary, urgent, early, short-term protective action for emergency workers and helpers, which are going to be sieverts. You got to wear a 4-foot thick lead suit. Information from the population on nuclear radiological emergencies, which is what? Shelter inside. How's that going to protect you? Prepared for long-term protective action. Long-term means you can't go back and get your property or sell it. You can't go to the graveyards and get soulless by visiting your lost loved ones. Harmonization of protective actions. There's the little critters right there. The Nuclear Energy Agency is an intergovernmental agency facilitated cooperation among countries with advanced nuclear disease factories infrastructures to seek excellence in nuclear safety, technology, science, environment, and law, which is, they don't have no concept of what that actually is. That's the staff, that's the crazies themselves. We call them nuclear terrorists in normal words, right? And their sidekicks like Madison Hillary, or Hilly, Madison, nuke terrorist Madison Hilly, and the nuke terrorists from the Nuclear Energy Agency. There they are there. You're looking at real terrorists. These are global terrorists. You got Sama over in the corner. Look at that. You got Sama right there. Sama Boba, or whatever the hell her name is. She's something, man. Wow, these people are crazy. Now, the gentleman in the middle with the red tie, we've covered him quite a lot in the last couple of years because he's the president. Wow. He's a Manchurian candidate, that fella. And you can see the rest of the perps. Look at Sama. We covered her a couple of weeks ago at the G7, the so-called G5. But I think, and look at the arbitrary, when you look into their faces, they all look so innocent, eh? It's hard to appreciate. You're looking at serial killers. Each and every one of these are serial killers, excluding moi, of course. Look at the serial killers. They even look like they're normal people, everyday people. If you stuck them in a prison jumpsuit, then you would understand it. If you knew what their dirty deeds are all about, you would understand it. These are ruthless sociopaths, psychopaths. It's located just outside of France. No wonder I don't like them. I like the French, of course, but not anything to do with the nuclear industry. The France's nuclear industry, the British, the Canadian nuclear industry, these are nightmarish industries, these people. These are real, they're the inbreeds of the vicious inbreeds. Oh, and generational inbreeds, it's really something. They should be dissected for research or something, right? Like you do with frogs. Nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. Irreversible entanglement, nuclear war. This is, I was trying to wrap my mind around what the hell is irreversible entanglement? Is this, I was thinking it was music, and irreversible entanglement more than doubles the original dimension of the song. That's turned out what it was about. A heavy gauge upgrade. I just walked away from it as soon as I seen that. But it's nuclear, so it's important, right, to when you see how nuclear influences, because people get lulled into complacency, right, through the disinformation campaigns that have been like Simpsons and the Hulk, Spider-Man, etc., etc., etc. U.S. plans, and they get you like the radioactive sponges. There's actually this cartoon out there where they use these. They have radioactive sponges from the Bikini, the Marshall Islands, and there's children these bizarre cartoons, and the caricatures are just Holy shit, these are wicked creatures. And they got children worldwide mesmerized from 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 years of age with this propaganda machine. It's really insidious that, because you bring it into your house and you feed it to your children. Here, sit in front of the TV and listen to the propaganda for a couple hours, honey. Mommy and Daddy's got to go smoke something in the back garden. U.S. plan for nuclear waste. So unfortunately, it comes back and haunts humanity for millions of years. U.S. plan for nuclear waste storage would boost equity funding. Only the nuclear industry would say something like that, by the way. The Energy Department is moving forward on sitting at least one temporary nuclear waste storage facility. They already got one. It's called the project, the Waste Isolation Pilot Project. Temporary. Betting that a focus on partnering directly with local communities. Now, we hear this all the time. They want to get the consent of the community to store nuclear waste, but they can't do it if you don't get consent. But we're going to do a 5-year survey to see if it's okay. Yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money, and we're going to throw a lot of money out into your community, whether we do it or not. We're just going to throw money around. And then we're going to have a referendum, see if the community wants to have a nuclear waste site in their community, because that'd be pretty cool, right? No. Yeah, but let's have the referendum. And if we don't, well, we'll start again somewhere else next year. It'll take another 5 years, and then we'll have a referendum. They can do this for thousands of years. They can't store it in the ground because it'll melt down. Betting that a focus on partnering directly with local communities. This is a big problem. You can't keep it at the surface because it's hemorrhaging isotopes into the environment from splitting the atoms. What's the solution? Well, if you took 1,500 universities and put the work on it, come up with an actual solution, you would, right? If you had a meteorite coming towards your planet, isn't that what you would do? You would take all the universities and you would put all that manpower to try to come up with a solution. Maybe I'm crazy to think that we do something rational. So if you had a meteorite coming towards the planet, or a lot of them, then you would take all the universities and put them to work trying to come up with a solution, which is what we should be doing right now, to come up with a solution to Fukushima and any other nuclear disasters, instead of banging our head and playing
That's the last time you'll slap your willy around.
Told you. Just put on your patriotic glasses and pretend that everything is going to be hunky-dory, right? Because it's not. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. That's the reality of life, right? Let's go back to that. I like that. I always gets my giggle up. See how far we can go before we can't see the screen anymore. In 1987, Congress designated Yucca Mountain. They spent $20 billion on litigation, by the way, on top of everything else. And it's on an earthquake fault line. They knew it. So they were up to something else, obviously, to burn all that money and this pipe dream, because they knew they weren't going to make it work right from the get-go. And they came with this kooky idea. They were going to fill the mountain up with air conditioners, because the mountain's capacity is based on how much heat the mountain can contain for 200 years, which is not an accurate way to go, right? So that body count is, think about that as realistic. Every time a body falls, that's the equivalent of eating food from that nuclear wasteland for people worldwide. Is the nuclear industry evil for growing food in Fukushima nuclear radioactive wasteland's no-go zone? Well, of course it is, Data. It's nuclear. I know, but I'm just asking. NRC begins special inspection. Just how many people dies in real time from nuclear worldwide. NRC begins special inspections of Davis-Besse Nuclear Power Station, which happens to conveniently be surrounded by farms and all kinds of estuaries and fresh water. Total coincidence. By the way, that's the picture they showed you. That's the picture of it from an aerial shot that I looked up. They show you just this little farm, right? They do that to make you complacent. To investigate the circumstances surrounding ground settling, I can't see it anymore, occurrences. Where's all the dead people? Oh, that's right, from radioactive fallout. That's real time, deaths from radioactive, perpetual fallout. The NRC, the non-regulatory committee, determined a special inspection was necessary after learning October 2022 fire protection piping failures at the Davis-Besse Nuclear Power Plant likely caused by excessive stress on the pipes from ground settling. They usually spend $500 million. They usually spend like $500 million on they usually spend $500 million. Yeah. Where the hell did that come from? That's pretty cool, actually. Certainly, the black hole. Now it all makes sense. Too late. You had your chance. Should have dived into that screen when you had a chance. U.S. should redeploy tactical nuclear weapons to South Korea's peninsula. Yeah, because, North Korea's going to get you. They're building nuclear weapons, Dana. They treat people really bad, Dana. Okay. Obviously, you're not from anywhere else on the planet. United Nations burnt down every community in South Korea 70 years ago as one of the first acts when they became UN, right? They were originally the League of Nations. They just rebranded them after Hiroshima and Nagasaki as the League of Nations. And North Korea at that point, up until Nagasaki, had been under Japan's brutal dictatorship for 50 years. So they blew up Japan, got them to surrender, and then he went over and invaded South Korea. North Korea, who now was trying to free themselves from being oppressed it was 100 years up to that point. And now for 70 years they've been oppressed, and land, sea, air embargo has been demonized by every single media on the entire planet, yet they've never attacked anybody in 70 years. America hasn't stopped, Russia hasn't stopped, Britain hasn't stopped. But North Korea hasn't attacked anybody, and yet they're the ones everybody feared. U.S. should, and they're surrounded by nuclear weapons on top of that. U.S. should redeploy tactical nuclear weapons. Yeah, because there's a big paycheck for a bunch of people. And no less than John Bolton, right? One of the war hawks for the last 60 years or something. All he wants is money for war. We need to go to war here. They got something like 900 conflicts going on at one time. And the only people making any money is the weapons producers. And these are companies that should be dealt with as companies, right? Put them out of business. Europe power prompt prices rise on less wind, more demand. Less wind, more demand. German day-ahead baseload power traded at $123 per megawatt, and France was 119 euros, which is a lot more. Of course, France got a lot of their reactors are offline. Lots of them now. They got Spring is here. Right, soon as summer starts, they're going to have to shut down a lot of the reactors again because they haven't got the water, because the glaciers are gone. Russia technical, which was really stupid to run your reactors on glacier water, if you ask me. Russia, and they'll leave some reactors running despite the rivers being boiling hot. They'll get what's called waivers, but that kills everything in the river. Russia's technical expert dies at KKNPP. He dropped dead of a heart attack, apparently. I can't remember. Go back to this one, which is just as crazy. This was India. What are the Celine features of civil liability for nuclear damage act? And 2010 examines the grounds on which the act has been criticized and its implications. Well, they're like the Price Anderson in North America, where the most liability is like $1 billion. The liability falls to the taxpayers for all nuclear accidents worldwide. No one will insure them, right? Because they're just one great big stupid disease factory on top of that. The most realistic apocalypse movie practically disappeared for almost 20 years. What the hell is the name of that again? It's like only one name or something. Maybe I'll see it on the bigger screen. I can't remember. Yeah, they took it out of circulation because it gave nuclear black eye. So a lot of the streaming services, when Ukraine and Russia started, originally took it off their streaming service at the same time. Protest against nuclear power. This is South Korea. Well, they're trying, bless their hearts, right? Did I get the name of that one? What the hell is I've watched it a number of times and I can't remember the name of it. It's Threads. That's right. Threads, one of the greatest films of all time. It's about a nuclear war and then the people that are left behind, how they're going to struggle, and the diseases and sicknesses and looting and lawlessness and the government trying to stay in power. Hinkley Point seawater discharge activity permit variation. This is super important, actually. Because Hinkley Point doesn't have a natural water source, so they're going to filter their own water, allegedly. And so I came across this and I was like, do I really want to go there? I'm happy I did, but this kind of stuff, you end up going way down the rabbit hole. Remove all references to the acoustic fish deterrent. The application asked the Environment Agency to make these changes to the permits. The first one was remove all references to the acoustic fish deterrent, because the average nuclear power plant kills billions and billions of adult fish each year at the water intakes. It boils trillions and trillions of small hatchlings and trillions and trillions and trillions of baby fish, of course, and hundreds of millions of young fish, each one of them. Each glass of water got 1 billion creatures on top of that, and 75 to 100 million of that are the phytoplankton, the basis of the food chain, the oxygen chain, the carbon sequestration chain per glass of water. These are just hideous machines. Remove all references to the effects of abstracting cooling water. The Environment Agency does not regulate abstraction from the open sea. Think of that statement. Really? So who does then? The Environment Agency does not regulate abstraction from the open sea. This is one of the scariest statements imaginable. Add the discharge of seawater and biomass from fish recovery and return system. We are proposing to add new conditions and limits in the permit to protect people and the environment. Well, how are you going to protect people and the environment if you're going to remove the acknowledgement that there's people in the environment? Remove all references to acoustic fish deterrent. Why would you do something like that? So, of course, I was stupid and started clicking on links. You know how gullible I am for links. I'm a sucker for them, eh? It's like, oh my God, oh no, don't do it, Data. We help people and wildlife adapt to climate change. Uh-huh. I'm sure you do, Timmy. I'm sure you do. You must be cooking now. Whoa, we got 15 people on our stream. Oops, forbidden subjects. Is the nuclear crazies? How's my stream? Is my stream healthy? Excellent connection. What the hell is a collection? Internet data. Excellent connection. I said connection. It just sounded that way. You know, I know. So we got almost double likes. We got more than double the votes, but we only got 15 people on the show that we've been doing for over a decade. That's pretty nice of everybody in the nuclear industry to censor me so I don't even exist anymore. Thank you very much. I gotta get that back up. We help people, wildlife adapt to climate change. Hard cases. Uncontaminated water accidentally released into the basement of Los Alamos National Laboratory's plutonium facility. Uncontaminated. Those are really interesting. How does that happen, that plutonium facility becomes uncontaminated? Kind of voodoo we got working here, I wonder. A cooling mechanism as part of a HEPA air filtering system was accidentally activated in March, releasing 4,700 gallons of water that took crews weeks to clean up. 4,700 gallons took weeks to clean up. The spraying equipment initially flooded the system's housing with water 1.5 feet deep, resulting in about 300 gallons overflowing to the basements. Took crews weeks to clean it up. No contaminants were found in the basement, although personnel's access to the wing of the facility was restricted. Really? Why would you do that, I wonder? The spray down mechanism designed to kick on if air going into the ventilation space exceeds a certain temperature, signaling a fire to protect the HEPA filters, she explained. Okay, gotcha. Anti-nuclear activists. Does any of them really exist? I think it's a figment of the world's imagination. We got 16 hardcore here tonight, so that's pretty good. An anti-nuclear activist said although some safety incidents and problems can be expected at a large, complex facility where hazardous operations are conducted, the deluge is significantly worse than normal for the plutonium facility known as PF4. Oh my goodness. Forgot about PF4 at Los Alamos National Laboratory, is it? Remediation includes sampling, draining, and processing the released water through the lab's radioactive liquid waste treatment plant. Well, if it's uncontaminated, why are you putting it through the lab's radioactive treatment plant? Because this is hardcore now we're talking about. And you're going to replace the HEPA filter. So the budget for the year for increasing the lab's funding for plutonium modernization operations to $1.76 billion, almost $2 billion, up $250 million almost from the $1 billion approved in 2022. So why are you sampling it? Why are you testing it? Why are you putting it through the radioactive filtration system if it's not radioactive? There's zero possibility they're going to do it unless it's radioactive. Is that why I'm censored so heavy tonight, I wonder? Point counterpoint, small modular reactors may be the best fit. Well, they might be, but they don't exist. You can't be the best fit if you don't exist. I don't know, maybe it's just me, right? It's just you, Dana. But he was so proud of his story, he had to give us a great big picture of himself. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Robert Lee. If you read the column regularly, you're gullible. You may not be surprised that I'm a member of the Sierra Club, the Nature Conservancy, and other that support our environment also support ESG protocol. So it might surprise you not in lockstep with the Sierra Club or groups that are rigidly opposed to nuclear disease factories. Georgia's Volt electric generating plant is 6 years behind schedule, 14 billion, 14 billion over budget, and contributed to the bankrupting Westinghouse. I asked what led to such a huge disparity in the money and times. He said it mostly due to U.S. not having built anything big in years, and we lost the skill sets associated with nuclear power construction, which we talk about all the time anyway. Small modular reactors that don't exist. They do not have the same generating capacity as large reactors. They were strung together. New Scale Corporation, which don't have any reactors, by the way. And citing nuclear batteries, nuclear industry is just, and using MIT as to give themselves some kind of credibilities. A fusion, not fission-based technology that creates energy similar to the sun as we decarbonize to address climate change. And it's just so dishonest for them to say the words climate change. Right? I don't know if dishonest is the best word, it's just deceitful. It's completely deceitful. Robert Lee is a retired social worker with an interest in history and politics. So why is he writing about nuclear? So, like, I like to see him go down there and get on top of these bags and tell us how good nuclear actually is. Which is why we got a poll, by the way. Is the nuclear industry evil for growing food in Fukushima nuclear radioactive wasteland's no-go zone? Maybe that's why I'm censored so heavy tonight. Could be any of those stories I've just done too. Of course, they're very touchy about. North Carolina Senate passed a bill to waste billions on nuclear disease factories over vital renewables. Former top Duke Energy executive turned serial killer, senator, leads legislative efforts. So you got Duke Energy executive is now a senator, and he's the reason the money is being allocated to the nuclear industry, and Duke Energy in particular. The North Carolina Senate approved a bill that would allow Duke Energy to spend potentially billions on more unneeded nuclear disease factories, including hundreds of billions on technology that won't exist for years if it ever does. Wow, it's not very often we hear dissenting voices, is it? Former top Duke Energy executive turned senator leads the legislative effort. That's crazy. Bill 678 revises the state's definition of renewable energy to clean energy. So they changed the definition from renewable to clean. That way you include nuclear energy that did not qualify previously as renewable energy. Thanks to Duke Energy executive, now as a senator. Paul Newton, a former top Duke Energy executive, is leading the push for the legislative change. So this is greenwashing on a hideous scale, done without the consent, done through back doors and getting one of their own elected, and then with the stroke of a pen deny everybody a future. It's like, wow. I mean, seriously. Just holy shit, right? The bill would also eliminate a state law requiring any new nuclear power plants to be built in North Carolina can only occur if renewable energy efficiency and other much cheaper and cleaner measures could not provide the same electricity. So, exclude everything but nuclear. What a crazy industry. Duke Energy would be the biggest benefactors of all of the changes. It prioritizes nuclear and fossil over solar and wind. Well, nuclear can't exist without fossil fuel, right? It needs 2 power plants dedicated to it 24 hours a day. Absolutely no reason for North Carolina Duke to sink another dime into more nuclear power. And now that renewables like solar and wind and battery storage are affordable. Well, you can use compressed air storage where you mine shafts and you compress air down to the mine shafts, and they're doing it, and it works 100% of the times. And you can use water batteries where you have 2 reservoirs and you pump water up and it falls when you need it, right? So, you don't need lakes, you don't need rivers, you just have 2 reservoirs and they fill each other up over and over and over. And then rain keeps them topped up on their own. If enacted, multi-billion-dollar nuclear boondoggle would be the latest setback for clean energy efforts. Yeah, this is absurd. This is outrageous. I mean, if that's not outrageous, what the hell is? Really? Good money. The bill would throw good money after bad, but promoting investments in nuclear technology that don't exist and might never make it off the drawing board. Well said. The struggle with small modular reactors are well versed here at our site. License application milestone for Fusion Uranium Corporation, Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, which is a terrible organization. I apologize because I'm Canadian, so. To license and construct a uranium mine mill facility at the Patterson Lake South. When was the last time Canada built a reactor? You don't need, the industry is in desperation mode, that's pretty obvious, and it's doing all of this so it can survive for another few decades. But it has no right to survive. It really has no right to survive. High-grade uranium project in Saskatchewan have begun front-end engineering designs for the project. This is posturing. You don't need the uranium. The company has said environment management of the project is continuing on schedule. Yeah, but the institutions that are doing this are bought and paid for by the industry. It's very disappointing, but when you get anything from the World Nuclear News, it's disappointing. Dutch government allocates funding for nuclear program. So Dutch is planning on 2 new reactors. You got one there right now. They're planning on putting 2 new reactors in the country and small modular reactors that don't exist. And they're signing these memorandums types of understandings for that. But they don't actually exist. This is in the Netherlands. I keep getting that wrong. Who I done an interview over there on the weekend. For 2 hours with a wonderful soul. And so Netherlands, I'm going to get it wrong again tonight. Sucks to be me. You'd have 9 to 13% of their electricity production for 2035. And they're saying this is the quantify climate change or something, right? Or net zero or carbon free. Well, that tiny fraction, even if you do pull it off, if you took the same money and put it towards geothermal, you would produce a lot more electricity. That's the industry. That's what it does. So we got twice as many votes as we do people on the show. That's pretty cool. Almost twice as many thumbs up as people on the show. Is the nuclear industry evil for growing food in Fukushima nuclear radioactive no-go zones? Well, of course it is, Dana. We got a stunning 98% of the people. Ethics of nuclear power as Earth heats up to be debated at Oak Ridge Church. Yeah, that's the perfect spot to have a debate at the church. Are next generation nuclear plants a morally acceptable way to address climate change? Of course not. That's the question that will be addressed in a panel discussion presented by University of Tennessee professor. There are plans to build an Oak Ridge in the next 10 years, which is a disease factory. A power-produced small modular reactor and a low-power demonstration reactor that will use a coolant and a fuel based on Oak Ridge National Laboratories research. Oak Ridge National Laboratory is one of the biggest aquifers in that part of the country, for starters, and that's contaminated since the 50s. Nations see, and they had multiple research reactors Meltdown there. It's a huge site, by the way, a radioactive site. Nations need to greatly increase renewables of energy, such as wind and solar. Well, what about geothermal? Geothermal never gets a mention. As soon as people start, they're like, what? Wait, what? Geothermal? That's great. Let's do that. And everybody's like, no, we need fusion. They've been at it for over 100 years, but 50 years hardcore, same as the small modular reactor. You haven't produced nothing. Right? And so if you come up with something that works, then you won't need to do this. And that's what geothermal is, something that works 100% of the times. No gamma shines, no X-rays, no neutron bombardments, no meltdowns. Ethics of nuclear power at a church with pro-nuclear only. Alberta's exploring potential small modular reactors with South Korea, and he signed a memorandum of understandings for something that don't exist. So, like, if you think Britain nuclear is bad, or you think France's nuclear is bad, brothers and sisters, you got to see Canada's nuclear industry. These are just bizarre creatures. I like to see a typical nuclear scientist under a microscope to see what they're actually made of. It'd probably be maggots or something. Should India consider phasing out nuclear power? Well, of course. You only got a little water, and they're always going to be situated in prime real estate on top of that. And India is perfect for geothermal. I don't know why they're looking at nuclear, well, for weapons, but how about geothermal? I don't know. I can't keep up with it. Wind and solar are intermittent. Of course, there's tons of solutions, and why use wind and solar when you can use geothermal? But if you do use geothermal, problem solved. If you use wind and solar, you can use storage. enough batteries. But there's like 20 solutions out there. There's the water batteries where you just build 2 artificial reservoirs and you pump water up with excess energy. And the same thing for compressed air storage. Dig a bunch of mine shafts and you just compress air down to it. When you need it, you release it and turn the turbine. It's just like stupid, simple, obsolete technology with inexpensive material on top of that. You don't have to triple check everything. It's like 120 PSI we're talking about. And then there's the same old excuse over and over. Oh, wind and solar are intermittent, Dana. Canada's push for small nuclear reactors will be costly, ineffective, some MPs warned. They'll get fired pretty quick. Federal government started actively exploring small modular disease factories that'll produce 35 times more low-level waste, 30 times more high-level waste, and 5 times more fuel rods. And they're going to be running on mixed oxide fuel, and so the emissions from mixed oxide fuel are freakishly, hideously evil. Typical radiation from a nuclear reactor fallout is 2 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. If you take and put it through a chain reaction again, which is mixed oxide fuel, is 2 billion times 2 billion more toxic than industrial poison. There'd be no interest in small modular reactors if it wasn't for the pro-nuclear lobby. Well said, wow. It's not based on evidence. Whoa, you're in a whole lot of trouble. You can't say that about the nuclear industry. You got any idea how much power they got? You're screwed. Susan O'Donnell, bless your heart, but you can't say stuff like that out loud. The nuclear industry will have your head tomorrow. At the University of New Brunswick, a spokesperson for the Coalition for Responsible Energy Development says small modular reactors don't exist. This is astounding revelation, folks. They haven't been built yet. So there. And one of the reasons that we're here today is because they are such a bad investment. This is confused. I'm confused. Among Canada's contribution to date is $29 million enabling small modular reactor program that launched in February. This was the startup supply network, right? For developing the reactors and fund research on how to deal safely with nuclear waste. For $29 million. You can't even get it fired up for that kind of money, you can't do nothing for $29 million in the nuclear industry. They spend that on coffee every week, for God's sakes. Small modular reactors are game-changing technology to electrify Canada, says the crazies. Opinion, my congressional district included San Onofre. Here's my plan for moving nuclear waste. Hang on to your boots. Keeping spent fuel at the San Onofre station long-term is unacceptable. With its location 100 feet from the Pacific Ocean, there are active fault lines surrounded by highly populated areas, which has been hemorrhaging emissions into the environment for 60 years. Undersecretary Jennifer Grahamhol's leadership, now we've covered her a lot, she's crazy. She's more pro-nuclear than Rod Adams, for goodness sakes. Department of Energy is committed to rebuilding trust around spent nuclear fuel issues. What are you talking about trust? They're splitting the atoms into the environment. You've never told the population that. New nuclear power could help U.S. climate fight, but faces hurdle. So they're saying the small modular reactors could help fight climate. And so what a weak argument, eh? What a desperate argument. Falling births a concern for North Korea. Well, infertility, how fewer babies means the end of the world. Because radiation sterilizes everybody worldwide through the radioactive fallout, right? Where are my two here? They're somewhere. They screwed up already. Looks like I screwed up. One more try. I'll use this model because we're at the end of the show. So here's 19 days of radioactive fallout. It covers the whole planet. So that causes the same thing with all the species. It causes all the species to be sterilized. Wow, the censorship tonight was over the top. They're really happy with me. I had more views on Rumble in 3.5 videos than I do of 10 to 12 of these videos. I'm censored here, so you can't, the real numbers are not available, right? They artificially, they just put whatever number they feel like it. I don't, like last night video, and 18 hours later, I only got 4 more thumbs up. Think about that statement. Only got 4 more thumbs up after 18 hours. We got a poll that I almost forgot about. Is the batshit crazy lunatic nuclear industry is the nuclear industry evil for growing food in Fukushima nuclear radioactive wastelands no-go zone? Duh, Dana. Oh no, I gotta ask the question though. You're a tough crew. I'll give you that. But think about the good side. At least she's not related to you. Dana, that's a terrible thing to say. Yeah, but it's true. Yeah, and it is terrible, I know. I was just kidding, man. I won't do that again, I'm sorry. I mentioned the A-10 Warthog only shoots dirty bombs. Here, have some liberty. So there's no fuel pool at Reactor 3, yet they said they got the fuel out of the pool. There's no fuel pool at Reactor 4, yet they said they got the fuel out of the pools. And they actually say it too. Here I am at the Reactor 4 fuel pool.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be Reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by...
Imagine how crazy they are that they done that. Imagine though. Imagine how crazy, because they know their parents knows the difference. They know their friends and families knows the difference. So imagine how crazy the International Atomic Energy Agency actually is, that they never said, no, you're not.
Where I'm standing.
Right? Ralphie Grossi's last year at the Constipated Party 27, was it, or 28? 27 last year. Got laughed at the auditorium when he said nobody died at Fukushima. Everybody was laughing. He couldn't get him to stop laughing. And he was like, come on, stop laughing. It's true, nobody died at Fukushima. With the all in with their crazies. Which is, let's end the poll, I guess. I'll call it a night. Another night where we got almost 2.5 times the votes as we do got people watching the show. Thank you, Google. We got 98% says, yeah, it's evil, Dana. Well, thank you for that. You're very, very, very kind. I'll be so sincere. How did we do on time tonight, I wonder? Oh, we're almost 2 hours. So hang on for another moment. A proctologist can handle it. Yes, I hope so. See everybody tomorrow night. Yeah, Charlie never called in. Happy 73-year, 9-month birthday, Albert. Thanks for moderating, Dana. Appreciate it. Good night, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Great day the day after and week after that. I'll be back tomorrow night. Twice as hard. We had one troll? Yeah, I guess so. They always come by. We'll see everybody on the other side tomorrow night. Great night, great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody on the other side. Take care, folks. Make it this Friday. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up. Costs us little and goes a long way. Yeah, good night, everybody. See everybody tomorrow night.